Why and how on earth did you construct such a structure? Well, those are some of the most common questions I get asked by you guys here on YouTube and even on my Facebook page. And today I'm going to share with you and show you guys how I constructed this structure, just show you a few of the steps that I took, and also explain how the whole thing works. I'm also going to tell you how much it cost me to construct and put up the whole structure. Well, it's not yet complete, but I'll give you an approximate. Now, as you can see, this is a double storage structure. It has 2 floors, down and up. Forgive me, you can hear the cows in the background, okay? This is very helpful in areas where land is very limited. So for example, town settings or any area where, you don't have a lot of land. This is very good because it helps you put up a structure that can take up twice as much as it would have taken up if you had put everything on the ground, okay? So you get to save land. Now this is family land, and of course when you look around, it looks like there's a lot of land, right? But just to let you guys know, this is not my land, yeah? This is my dad's land. Despite the fact that it's inherited and, well, he inherited it from his dad, it's not my land. He hasn't given it to me. So please stick around. I'm going to take you around the structure. Now, as you can see, the whole structure is made up of 2 floors. The whole structure is supported by poles. The structure measures 8 meters by 15 meters. If we convert that to square meters, that's around 120 square meters. And when I was bringing in my birds, I had calculated that I'm going to put in around 6 birds per square meter, which is the recommendation. But then I brought in 800 birds, and currently I have around 760 birds. Then the height of the structure is around 7 feet for the lower floor, and then the upper floor varies. Then behind section is around 6 feet in height. Then the front section is around 11 feet. Now starting with the lower floor, as you can see, the walls are around 3 feet, like I already said. And then the top wire mesh is 4 feet. The structure is supported by poles, and we all know that poles are not so strong, so I had to use very many poles during its construction. Again, I wouldn't use bricks for the lower floor. Yeah, I would use iron sheets because they are way cheaper. Okay, I found out that there is no necessity for using bricks for the lower section of the structure. Iron sheets would serve, they would do well enough, and they are cheaper. Now, the upper part of the structure and the lower part of the structure had their walls built all the way up. So you can see that the sides again have wire mesh. There's very strong wire mesh on the inside, and then a thin layer of wire mesh on the outside. That helps prevent, wild birds from coming in, and then wild animals, and even protecting against thieves coming in to steal the hens and the eggs. So for the floor, I used concrete, and right now it's quite hard to see the concrete because, there is sawdust all over and it's quite hard to access the concrete. But the one thing that you need to do after you've constructed your house is that make sure you use a very thick layer of the sawdust, because if not, the chickens are going to scratch and they will reach the concrete. And if the concrete is not strong enough, they might even be able to scratch beyond the concrete and access the soil, which is very detrimental. It could lead to diseases. Then the upper section of the chicken house, the floor was made out of timber. This timber is supported using poles, very many poles. If you are constructing your chicken house, I would advise you to use stronger poles than I did use. Yeah, but mine serve too, just that I have to put in a lot of poles underneath to support the upper floor. But I use timber, which is not quite cheap. It's a bit expensive, but I use timber. Then on top of the timber, you will see this when we go to the upper section of the structure. But on top of the timber, I put a very thin layer of wire mesh and then put a very thin layer of concrete. This thin layer of concrete prevents, the chickens from scratching and then reaching the timber. Now going to the upper section of the house, well, before we go up, you'll notice this stairway, yeah? So this is a stairway which is quite easy to make. It's quite cheap to make. It is supported by, again, a few poles, which you can see over here. And then here, I made 3 lanes of timber On the two sides, as you can see, there are a few supports to make sure you climb very well. Then in the middle, it's all clear. That's to make certain that, if we need to use a wheelbarrow or anything that moves on wheels to move up, we can very easily move up and be confident that we shall not have any difficulties. Then the upper section, as you can see, we shall start with the floor, yeah? So the floor, like you can see, I told you there's a very thin layer of concrete on top. Then below that, we use timber and a small layer of wire mesh, which you can see here in a photo that I took during the construction. Then the upper section of the structure, you can see that the wall was built not all the way up, but high up, well, high enough. And that is again to prevent, rain from coming in and all those kinds of things. Then the lower section, thankfully, by the time I came, they hadn't completed it all the way up because it's very essential for the aeration. Now, the side walls were made using iron sheets, and I wish I knew this is what I would have used for the lower part of the structure because it's way cheaper and there is really no benefit, at least for me in this location, there is no benefit for using bricks and, cement and sand over iron sheets because it's not too hot, but it's not cold enough that you need, that extra additional warmth. So iron sheets would have served enough and brought my costs down. Now on the lower side of the structure, you can see that the iron sheet is 3 feet in height. Then the wire mesh is also 3 feet. Then the upper part of the structure, the upper side, you can see that the iron sheets, I put around 5 feet. Then the rest, which is around 5 to 6 feet, the upper bit is made up of just wire mesh. Again, I stress that this wire mesh is very important. It protects you from birds. You need to make sure that wild birds don't come in because these wild birds are very notorious for carrying diseases. They are resistant, but they will give your chickens diseases. So you have to make sure that nothing can come in. Then as you can see, currently there are a lot of things on this upper floor. As you can see, there is some sawdust. This sawdust I've put here, I'm preparing to bring in more birds for the upper floor. So the sawdust is not sufficient enough. You need to make sure it's at least, 3 to 5 inches. And this is not enough. So I'm planning on bringing in more so that I make it up to at least 5 inches for me for this upper section because remember, the layer of concrete I put is very thin and down is just timber. I don't have concrete. So I want to put a very good layer of the sawdust. Then when we move outside, you'll notice that I put gutters on the structure. These gutters help us arrest water, which is then collected in a tank. We constructed a very big tank over here. It's around, 27,000 liters. That's big enough to take me, for a number of weeks if we don't have water over here. The tank is outside the poultry structure. That's to enable easy access so that, if people outside the house want to use the water, they don't need to enter the gate, of the poultry structure. Then just recently, very recently actually, about 3 weeks ago, I started putting up a fence. So this fence is constructed from chain link and the chain link is supported by poles, electric poles. Over here in Uganda, we use them as electric poles, but they are treated poles and they are treated to prevent termites from, biting through them. So we put the poles down and supported them with concrete and then put the chain link all around the poles. Then I'm planning on planting a hedge with thorns all around the structure, as you can see here. These thorns help to provide more structural support for the fence. That way, when the wind comes, the hedges absorb, most of the weight of the wind, and hence the fence can stay for longer. Then it also protects, from invaders. Since the hedge has thorns inside it, it protects from invaders, from thieves, from local chickens, and all those kinds of things. So I'm planning on putting them all around, as you can see in this small section. So this poultry structure cost me around $4,500. I know you're saying that's too expensive. Yeah, I know. Like I told you, I know I would have saved more if I wanted to construct the structure again. Depending on where you are, you don't really need to use bricks on the lower section of the structure. You can use iron sheets. That's cost saving. And then there are a lot of other things that I could probably have spent less money on if I was constructing the structure right now. So probably it would have been, let's say, around $3,500. This structure at the moment can take up 1,500 birds, but I've noticed that the birds are too spaced, So with the experience that I've learned right now, I think I'm going to, compact them a little bit more So I think I'm going to be able to go up to 2,000 birds inside this poultry structure.